Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, but it's not about the collector's vault, but you know how it goes with the collector's vault. Just go in and do it. Get your 4-star, 5-star Cyclops artifact, and if you want to do any other ones, good luck. Today's video is actually about Cyclops' paramour, bing, 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 Jean Grey, and we're going to be testing out Jean Grey in PvP on autoplay, because obviously on manual, you can win them all, using two different CTPs. Now, the first CTP we have is a mighty CTP of Greed. I'll explain as we're going through the fights why this is one of the best, if not the best CTP for her in PvP. However, it is a mighty, so you can still get a better version of it with a brilliant, so that is something to recognize. The other CTP we're going to be testing on Jean is actually on Carnage right now. It is the brilliant egg. Oh, the egg. That's right. We're cracking out some omelets today, testing it on Jean. So it does have an inherent advantage being the brilliant version versus the mighty version. I know that, but I don't have a brilliant, I don't have a brilliant greed to test, and I'm not going to test. I actually don't even have a mighty egg to test in that sense either. So that's the test here. Let's go through the rest of the build really quickly before we jump into the action. We have a plus 12 4-star artifact with decreased pierce damage reduction. Such a good roll there on that. It's got the increased damage to supervillains and superheroes. Very cool. Power of Angry Hulk, stage 12. We have the max type enhancement, chef's kiss. We have Hulk as her tier 4 striker, which is deadly, although her tier 4 ability is already super deadly. And then we have there the Urus. We've got the 4 heal, Odin's Blessings, the 4 magic, the 8 HPs, and then the rest a mixture of cooldown and crit damage. As far as the full stats, we're looking at capped attack speed, ignore defense, nearly capped cooldown, but it doesn't matter too much, nearly capped on dodge. I really wish that was capped. I'm about 8% off or 7.5% off on that, and then about 15% uncapped on the crit rate, which doesn't really matter too much, and 20% uncapped on the crit damage. Again, those could be higher, sure, if you want to do more damage, but ultimately, it's not about damage for Jean, it's about survivability. We're going to be doing 10 fights full auto with both CTPs just to test them out. Perfect. As soon as Jean Grey dies, or as soon as we win, we will just cut to the next match immediately. And so we'll start this one off by just explaining why I'm not playing on manual. The reason why I'm not playing on manual is because it's a lot easier. It's very different than playing on auto for Jean. On auto, as you will see, she very rarely prioritizes her third skill, and that is often why she dies. She'll take damage and take damage and take damage, and then she never really heals it back unless you have a CTP that heals. So that's why, although the authority is very, very good, especially with that steel proc that gives you super guard break immunity, it doesn't provide any healing, and so her autoplay rotation can often leave her to die. So because Jean's autoplay rotation is so bad, if you're going to be playing her on auto, that means you want a CTP, or if you're forced to use her in autoplay content like a Alliance Conquest and Alliance Tournament, you're going to want a CTP that does provide her some healing for the times when she doesn't use her third skill, which is most of the time unless you have very low cooldown. So for that reason, I think that the Greed and the Refinement, the Egg CTP, do tend to come out on top. Are you serious? I just died twice. By the way, of all of the available reforged CTPs in MFF, there are only 4 that give the character super guard break immunity, SGBI. And SGBI, Super Guard Break Immunity, is very important because there are a lot of skills like Adam Warlock's second skill that go beyond Guard Break to something called Super Guard Break. So having the buff on certain CTPs that are reforged that gives you Super Guard Break Immunity protects you from being interrupted during those attacks. And the 4 that protect you are Mighty and Brilliant Greed, Mighty and Brilliant Regeneration, try that one again. The 4 CTPs when reforged that give your character super guard break immunity are the Mighty Authority, the Mighty Patience, and of course the Brilliant versions, the Brilliant Authority and the Brilliant Patient, the Mighty and Brilliant Greed, and the Mighty and Brilliant Refinement. Those are the only 4. Now we're going to throw Patience out the window because it's just not a very good CTP, turns out. So we're left with Authority, Greed, and Refinement that gives super guard break immunity. It's actually really important nowadays to have that for PvP. Now, Authority, we already talked about, it struggles a little bit more with Jean because she doesn't heal herself. She doesn't have any automatic healing like Hulk does, like Gore does, etc. So So then you're left with just Greed and the Egg Refinement. Damn, after losing the first few, Greed is kind of coming back and sort of trying to even things out in terms of its power. That's pretty good. I'm happy to see it performing a little bit better than the first few. Never mind. I literally, as soon as I start talking, the game attempts to troll me. But anyways, so given the ideas and given the need for super guard break immunity, how important that is, you really boil things down for Jean to Refinement or Greed. Now, there's one key difference between Refinement and Greed. There's like one really massive difference. For Greed, as you are seeing here in some of the matches, Greed triggers what's called an ambush proc, and the ambush proc is going to give you complete immunity to Reflect. It's also going to give you Ignore. It's also going to ignore, it basically allows you to ignore some of the enemy's defenses. It ignores non-boss damage decreases. Damage decreases that you're going to see from things like Shuri, Colossus, etc. So the Greed allows you to basically ignore some of those defenses, but the more important part is the one that I mentioned first, is that immunity to Reflect damage. And Jean Grey has Reflect on her tier 4 skill, so you can basically, if things are timed correctly, right, if the ambush proc triggers when your enemy Jean Grey or Ancient One or whoever has their Reflect up, you're going to be able to not take any Reflect damage, which can be very powerful and can make Jean a lot more consistent against teams that try to run multiple Reflect counters to basically cheese wins against the Jean Grey autoplay, like putting together teams with Emma Frost and Ancient One and Silver Surfer perhaps. There's quite a few different characters that can act as sort of massive Reflect counters, and unfortunately on autoplay without a Greed, Jean Grey falls victim to those teams very easily, even Destroyer teams. So that's really the big advantage of the Greed, is allowing you to, bypass damage reduction that the enemy may have in place on their team, and also protect yourself from, again, it's not a constant effect, but you allow yourself to be protected from Reflect at certain points in time. That is basically where the Greed excels as the Mighty or as the Brilliant version. However, the Greed struggles compared to the other CTPs when it comes to how much defense it provides, because the Greed actually doesn't provide any defense at all. The Authority provides defense in the form of that bubble, right, and the damage accumulation that you get from it. And then the Refinement provides defenses in terms of the heal and also in terms of the HP. But the Greed doesn't do that. The Greed has a tiny heal on it that procs every so often, but oftentimes that's not enough to protect you from the continuous damage you're going to be taking from other opponents. Now, I know I haven't been able to showcase the ambush effect and how it counters Reflect. I'm hoping that versus this team, I'll be able to do so as long as my Jean can eat through this gore, and thankfully she has. So pay close attention. My Jean will start to take Reflect damage from him, but see, Reflect damage immunity. Actually, there you go, perfect. Caught it immediately. That yellow text was popping up. Now she's taking Reflect damage, and she almost died because of it. But on Silver Surfer's first life, because that ambush proc was active, she took 0 Reflect damage, which is absolutely perfect and is exactly the reason that makes the Greed CTP, the Mighty Greed or the Brilliant Greed, so good for Jean, especially when it comes to autoplay. Of course, if you're playing manually, you don't need Reflect immunity because you can just be like, oh, I'm going to iframe. You can play smart because you're controlling the character. But if you're not going to be playing on manual, then it makes the CTP much more valuable, and that's, again, part of the reason why I wasn't going to test these two CTPs on manual, because honestly, you could make a Judgment CTP look really good if you play manually with Jean, and that just boils down to how insane she is when you play her, and you're able to use that third skill effectively. So now we're on the last match of 10 before we switch over to the Refinement CTP, the Brilliant Egg. I do expect it to perform a little bit better than the Greed just because you don't see that many Reflect teams, and also because it's a Brilliant versus a Mighty, but I still think that the Mighty Greed does a really good job. And the Mighty Greed has the additional bonus, not being shown in this video, of also having some use for PvE content, especially when you're talking about ABX and ABL. That proc that activates every so often, it does increase your damage versus different types, whether it's Combat Blast or Speed Universal, and you can use that to bump up her damage. The final tally with the Mighty CTP of Greed was 6 wins and 4 losses. pretty good, but also not that far away from just a 50-50 coin flip. So I would like to see those odds be a little bit more in my favor, a bit more like 7-3 or even 8-2. I understand that it's on autoplay, but still, this is one of the most, if not the most expensive character in the game with one of the best builds you can find. So I was expecting a little bit more from the greed. It may have just been bad luck in terms of the autoplay rotation, in terms of the teams that I face, etc. There's always a little bit of RNG in MFF. You can't escape it, but them's the breaks. We're going to see a huge jump in her HP when we equip it here. I just want to do a little ceremony. 174,000 HP, and now we're going to give her the Brilliant Egg with the Vitality proc, and now she jumps to a whopping 202,000 HP. And just to quickly summarize what the egg does, the Vitality proc, which can activate every 7 seconds for 6 seconds, is going to give her a continuous 25% heal, which is crazy. Very, very high healing, but it also gives her a flat buff to her HP and her recovery rate. Her recovery rate's now sitting at a capped 280%, which is bonkers. So her healing is just off the charts. It's not going to affect her healing with her third skill, but that doesn't matter. As for the rest of the ability, it also gives her a barrier. It also gives her another heal, and then it also gives her a barrier for 9 hits. It can be penetrated. It's not a barrier that ignores penetration, but it is still a barrier nonetheless. Now, the other effect on this, the Vitality effect, you have to click on the text to find out, but this is what's so important about it. It gives you guard break and super guard break immunity. It doesn't give you any of the other fancy effects that ambush or steal has, but the fact that it gives you the super guard break immunity is vitally important. So now, without further ado, I recognize that being on autoplay and doing a random assortment of teams can provide an additional layer of RNG, and people could say, oh, Alex, maybe, you know, after seeing the results, you got easier teams with the greed, or you got easier teams with the egg. Who knows? And that is absolutely possible as an argument. However, I wanted to simulate what it would be like to just have the CTP on and run through your autoplay, because we already, wow, yo, did you see that? She just popped a crazy heal. She still died. She still died to reflect, but she popped a crazy heal just before dying. And that's why the greed is good. Okay, so we get a really good explanation, a really good example right away of what makes the greed potentially so powerful. I certainly would not have died twice to that Ancient One with a greed, but unfortunately, the reflect is too much for JEAN, even with a Brilliant Egg. Now, back to what I was saying about having random teams in each of the 10 comparisons. I absolutely could have just queued up 10 matches versus the top 10 players in PvP in Vibranium and tested it that way, and that would have created more of a control group for the in-game action. However, it wouldn't, in my opinion, simulate the CTPs as well in real terms, because in real terms, you're not always going to be fighting those players. You're going to be fighting a mixture of teams, and these mixture of teams can have different characters. You find that there's a lot more homogeneity at the top of PvP, where players are basically just copying each other's teams because they want to use what is most effective. And so I wanted to get as much of a wide scope for these different teams. It's actually funny that we get 2 Ancient One teams in a row, but I wanted to see, you know, with different teams, how these CTPs are going to perform in more realistic conditions. Now, the healing is not enough there. It was enough for Ancient One, but not enough for JEAN. Very disappointed with that. And we fall to 0-2. All right, next team, we have no Ancient One in sight, so this should be very interesting. I was honestly a little shocked that the healing was enough for Ancient One, but not enough for that enemy JEAN. But hey, it is what it is. Let's see how she does here versus this Hulk. She does not tank the damage, sadly, and gets one tapped. It's kind of shocking to see what's potentially, I don't know if I want to say that she's less tanky, but the egg is kind of weird. Ooh, we just ripped through that JEAN. The egg is a little weird, I'm not gonna lie. She does the second skill a lot. Maybe I'm getting interrupted less. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? Ooh. Took a lot of damage there, but clutched it out. Okay, there we go. Finally, next matchup here, we got Molecule Man. I haven't seen this lead in time. This is what I wanted. I wanted some variety. Molecule Man is interesting because he reduces the effects of Reflect by 50%. People forget about this. He has the same effect that America Chavez has. He also ignores Shuri. So my team is basically operating as if I didn't have Shuri, which means I'm not going to be getting a damage reduction versus Gore. I'm also not going to be getting a damage increase versus either Gore or Jean, which could hurt me. The other thing is he also reduces incoming chain hit damage. He has a very OP leadership. It just sucks that people don't use him nowadays because he's just not strong enough on his own. As you saw, he basically turned to paper at the beginning of the match versus Jean. But maybe his leadership is strong enough. Not right now. It's not. To just buffer 2 characters, right? And so you could use a leadership like Molecule Man as sort of like a mini Greed if you don't have one. Obviously, he's a very expensive character to build up, so having a Mighty Greed might be a lot cheaper than having a Molecule Man or America Chavez, but it's just something to keep in mind if you hate dying to Reflect, but you don't want to swap your CTP on Jean, or you're happy with the performance of another CTP. That's not a Greed. But we get the clutch win again. All right, next matchup here, a mirror match with literally the same set dealer as well. Oh, Shuri holding her own versus Jean. All right, let's see how this one goes. We're gonna pop 4 and then pop 2. Don't get him killed. Get guard broken a bunch. Now the nice thing is that the recovery with the refinement, the egg, should be very nice. And you see there's like a green halo around her when the vitality effect triggers, which actually does look really cool. It's almost like Super Saiyan charge up. But essentially the idea behind the vitality effect is that you're getting guard broken, right? You're getting super guard broken and you're taking damage and you're almost dead, and then it triggers giving you super guard break immunity and healing you. So you have this really cool yo-yoing effect. All right, next matchup here. We're back to the old Reflect goons. Let's see if Jean has what it takes. Oh, she did. Did she do 3? Did Jean actually pop 3? No way. That's crazy. We gotta kill Gore before we there, boom. There, yeah, look. Oh, Super Saiyan Jean. That looks kind of sick. I'm not gonna lie, bros. I'm not gonna lie. If there wasn't so much caca on the screen, if you could actually see what was going on, that green glow would look absolutely sick. Ooh, that reflect. Oh my God, the reflect, and she couldn't even trigger the tier 4. I did kill Ancient One though, which is interesting. Somebody used their 3rd skill. I think it was them, not me. Ooh, I'm not doing damage. That's not good. This is not good. Because of Ancient One, I'm not actually dealing any damage right now. I am stun locking her, which is very interesting, and this is why Super Guard Break is so important. You see you're getting stun locked, and then she died. So that's why Super Guard Break is so important. And if we check the build, she's got a Rage. No Super Guard Break on the Rage. Doesn't matter if it's Brilliant or Mighty. So having the defenses only takes you so far. If you're going to get stun locked to death, it doesn't matter how high your resistance is, because eventually she pops the tier 3. And then she pops the tier 4 is actually what buffs her damage above where it needs to be. I believe it's either the tier 4 buff or it's the reflect on the tier 4. But you can essentially see this Jean can't do anything. She's perpetually locked in this thing here. Actually, it might just be Hulk himself striking. Hulk might have just won that one for me. Hold up. All right, on to the next one here. My batteries on my phone is dying, so I'm really nervous. We only have a few fights left, but I gotta see if I can make it or if Jean is going to eat through my battery to the end. Right now, this team is a lot less scary without a Jean on it. So we'll see. Ooh, one tap the Hulk. Jeez. That was the yo, she did her 3rd skill. That's crazy. I have no idea what prompts Jean's autoplay to do her 3rd skill. It honestly seems so random. It seems to be if a character like has just died and someone else is prompting it. But yo, we're 5-2 right now. We're cruising. I lowered the brightness on my phone all the way so that I just have to watch the replay on OBS here. But we have a slightly different team, but the similar tactic here. I don't know if Emma Frost is a better option than Ancient One, because Ancient One does provide a lot of other buffs, right? The resistance, the ignore defense, the ignore dodge, and the increased elemental damage, which are all very good for your Jean. Emma Frost does do more damage, but you can see the healing on the vitality is insane. Pop the tier 4, please. Pop, bro. Pop the tier 4. Pop the tier 4. Pop the tier 4. Pop the tier 4. Honey, honey, honey. Pop the tier 4. Honey. Oh my God. If she didn't pop the tier 4, I was gonna lose it. Now, because of the tier 4, we actually don't have any attacks going when Emma comes in, so Emma doesn't get that free cheese on us, and we get the kill. Bing bong. That was sick. Ooh, Hulk was too much, but we're gonna come back to life, and the egg continues to make its It's Case. Almost died there, but we're 6-2. All right, battery's holding strong at 3%. We got 2 more matches left, but right now the Egg is outperforming the Greed. It has the same number of wins with only 2 more matches to go. I could absolutely lose these 2 matches, and it ends up being an identical, identical 10 runs, but I'm pretty happy with what I've seen from the Egg. It still definitely stings to lose to Reflect, but I feel like you have a much better odds versus Gore and versus especially other Genes. Like, it seems much harder to lose 1 versus 1 Gene versus Gene because you have so much healing pumping out when the Vitality procs, and because your defenses are so high and the resistance is so high, other Genes can't kill you fast enough until the next Vitality proc activates. And especially if they don't have their own Egg or their own Greed or another CTP that gives Super Guard Break immunity, they're eventually going to get caught up in a combo where they're going to get stun locked to death and then not be able to do anything and then just watch as they die, because then you'll just trigger your tier 4. And if, yeah, there we go. Hulk just obliterates. Perfect. Love him as a tier 4. Almost died to the Reflect, but then we don't. All we got to do is clutch this one out. Boom! 7-2, baby. What makes me the happiest about this comparison video is actually that we're talking about CTPs that are not the most popular, right? Everyone talks about regen and authority for PvP. Everybody talks about judgment and energy and rage for PvE, but very rarely are people like excited about Greed or excited about the Egg. And you often see people posting on the CTP day, oh, I got another Greed. Oh, I got another Egg. What am I going to do? It's Egg day. And they're so depressed. But seeing this, right? And you're not going to have the same results, but you can still have really good results with a Mighty Egg. This actually gives me a lot of hope. There's a lot more balance and parity among the CTPs than I originally thought. And I'm really happy to see these two perform so well. Obviously on a super OP character, but still, I'm just happy to see them perform well. And we know the Egg works well on Carnage as well. Yo, she tanked that. Maybe, yeah, maybe. Yo, and she blitzed it. Maybe the Reflect is not as bad of a problem as I thought, because the Egg really only lost to Reflect twice now out of like 5 or 6 runs. We saw a lot of Reflect teams, and there we go. There you have it, folks. 8-2. So after losing the first 2 rounds, she goes on an 8-0 streak to end the video. Are you kidding me, Gene? Absolute dominance with those last 8 runs. My phone is en fuego, but still. So there you have it. Those are the results. 6-4 for the Greed, 8-2 for the Egg. Now, there's absolutely a possibility that the Brilliant Greed would have done better than 6-4. And there's also a possibility that we got maybe slightly easier teams with the Egg versus the Greed. I honestly don't think so. Like, my memory for the teams is pretty good, and we saw some busted teams. We saw some kind of lame teams. We saw a couple teams without Gene at all. So I think the balance there was pretty good, but I think the biggest difference in this comparison, and I apologize for not having one, but is having to compare a Brilliant Egg versus a Mighty Greed. However, keep in mind that you can check the stats on a Brilliant Greed, but they're not going to be giving you, a much bigger advantage than you already have. So what I'm trying to say is that the difference between a Mighty Greed, right, where a Mighty Greed can ignore by up to 35% on the ambush, and then it's going to give you a 10% heal with the 150% increase damage to the different types. The Brilliant Greed, it can ignore damage decrease by 70%, which is double, and that's very, very good. However, that doesn't seem to be Gene's problem. Damage doesn't seem to be Gene's problem in most of these matchups. It's defenses, and it's surviving, and it's not getting locked down by a bunch of super guard break attacks by Gore or by another Gene. Now, the heal is better on the Brilliant Greed. It's a 25% heal that procs every, I don't know how many seconds. That is nice. I do like that 25% heal. It's a lot bigger than the 10% heal, right? It's more than double. So that is a big difference maker. The increased damage from 150 to 220, very good for PvE. Again, probably not going to be noticed too much in PvP because she one-taps opponents so easily when she gets off a clean combo. So I'm not too worried about the offensive stuff being a big difference maker, but the defensive stuff certainly, like the 25% heal certainly could have clutched me out 1 or 2 matches there. Versus the Mighty that only gives 10%. So yeah, unfortunately could not test that. I'll try to get my hands on a Brilliant Greed in the future, so I'll have that test. But for the time being, there's good hope for both the Mighty Brilliant Egg and the Mighty Brilliant Greed. Let me know which one you thought performed better with Jean, given the circumstances and given the teams. Thank you so much for watching. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.